Welcome to the Pro Coder Show, the place where you learn to become a savvy pro. And now for your host. He's built mission-critical systems and battled midnight failures. He's released software used by millions. And he's the biggest Doctor Strange fan you'll ever meet. Greg Turnquist.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Pro Coder Show. We had an episode last week while I was in Destin, Florida. Well, now I'm back home in my home up Middle Tennessee and surrounded by snow and ice. So I missed the sunny shores down in the Gulf. But we're here to talk about a fun topic that it draws a lot of commentary. A lot of people like to chime in, and it's an article that I spotted on Reddit. We're going to go in and look at this, and what I want to do is try to share some of my knowledge and experience so you can process this and reach your own conclusions. Okay. There's actually a philosophy that I've come to learn and respect, which says if you know what's going on, you'll know what to do. Now, I did a video series recently and on my book, What is a Database? And part of the opening mantra of that thing is I just want people to understand what is going on here so that you can make the right decisions on this. Now let's pull up this article or this question somebody posed, and they said, let's read it. I'm going to read it out loud here because also if you're catching this on the audio podcast, you may not be able to read this, but the headline is this is in the interviews subreddit. It says, I passed 3 interviews and my offer letter says $60,000. But during the first interview with an HR lady, I mentioned my salary expectations were 65 to 70,000. What should I do? Now that's a great question. So this is something I'm sure if you've done at least one round. Now, if you're still in university or boot camp and you haven't quite entered it, then you may not have felt this yet, but maybe you can anticipate what this feels like. If you've been through this process at least once, then you know what that tension, the butterflies in your stomach feeling, what that's like, and it's not a happy feeling. So basically, I'll go on and read the rest of their post to elaborate on this. So in the details, it says during the first interview, and the op signals that this was with HR. I was asked for my salary expectations, and I said 65 to 70,000. I also heard from her that the budget set for the job is 60 to 70,000. So right here, the op is signaling that what they were interested in or what their expectations were fits within the offer band that the person at the company is offering. So we're not talking about they want 90 and they're offering 60. We're not talking about something that far afield. We're talking about 2 different ranges that sit on top of each other. The op goes on to say, but the offer letter sent to me by another HR employee says 60K. What should I do? I'm thinking of sending an email, but what should I say in it? How should I word it? Also, should I send a phone call? Should I send a phone call? Maybe it's make a phone call. Should I send a phone call in addition to emailing or instead of emailing? This HR employee had previously called me to confirm my address, so I have their number. Edit, this is my current email draft. If you recommend different wording, please let me know. Quote, I did want to mention that during my first interview, I had mentioned that my salary expectations are in the $65,000 to $70,000 range. I see that the offer letter has 60,000. Would it be possible to adjust the offer to align with the 65,000 to 70,000 range? Thanks, close quote. Second edit, the op goes on to add, I make 47,000 currently, so I don't want to walk away, but just test the waters. I don't want to play hardball. Okay, there's a lot in here to digest. This is a bit here. And let's first acknowledge one thing. When we're going through the interview process, it is a very emotional feeling, okay? If you're not somebody that is doing sales, if your daytime job is not involved in sales, where you're having to negotiate all the time, the people that negotiate all the time they have kind of a different script on how they operate. Okay. Um, if that's not your daytime job, then of course this is going to be an emotional experience. Um, Something I used to do when I was a little bit younger is I studied martial arts. Why are we talking about martial arts if we're talking about interviewing or negotiating an interview request? So I studied Taekwondo and I did that for about 5 years. And one of the things that you do is you learn how to punch and kick, or you learn some of the intros to that stuff, and you build up a certain set of skills. And part of this is it's reps. You're doing repetitions to kind of get it down. And one of the things they would do from time to time is have a tournament. Now, it's nothing like the Karate Kid movie. If you've seen that movie, it's not that aggressive or violent. Instead, the tournament is within the school. And then also, our schoolmaster actually was associated with two other schools, all in the Central Florida area. So we would actually sometimes buddy up with a couple other schools for a tournament. And so there's some very strict rules that they have. And there's the thing is, it's designed with the whole point of a tournament where you're fighting with somebody else, or I should say sparring with somebody else. The whole point of the tournament isn't to crush and defeat your enemy, as Thor is not Thor, as Conan the Barbarian would say, crush your enemies. It's not that. The whole point of a tournament in martial arts is to get you used to the feeling of adrenaline if you ever actually find yourself in a real legitimate fight and you're trying to defend yourself. It's a controlled environment where instead of doing repetitions facing a mirror where there's nobody coming back at you, but it's not shadow boxing. It's instead to meet somebody else who's real and dynamic, and you're having to pivot and react to what they're doing. And you will have adrenaline pour into your system. And the idea is that if you do that several times, if you attend several tournaments while going up the belt ranks, you learn to deal with it, to compensate, to be able to adjust. To even though you can feel every tournament I would go to, I would feel the butterflies in my stomach. But each tournament became a little easier, a little easier. I knew that they had rules in place. They had judges in the match that were making sure that they had limitations on where you could strike somebody. Okay, and it's like in general, you can't kick somebody below the waistline, waist to legs. Okay. Um, it's ironic, but you actually get more points if you actually kick or punch somebody to the head. And why is that the case? You think the head is the most vulnerable? That's the most likely place somebody's going to be able to defend themselves. And also, somebody that can kick that high or get a punch through is not going to have as much strength. Whereas it's very easy to apply full power to the bottom, to somebody's legs, knees, or groin area. So those are rules to protect you. And the other rules are, if any blood is drawn, you immediately you immediately lose that match and you're actually thrown out of the tournament. So they have upper limits on that. And the thing is if you're one of these people that maybe you happen to join a school because you're on there's somebody that's roaming around looking for a fight and they don't mind getting thrown out of the tournament. Basically, somebody who does that is not going to be allowed to come back to another tournament if they're like that. So they have very strict rules for safety. So the idea is to have a nice, controlled, safe environment where you get a dynamic way to interact with people to learn to control the adrenaline. And what I'm saying here is that if you're a salesperson, you have to do this kind of stuff every day. You're going to get used to the adrenaline. But if you don't do this every day, if you're not in sales, this will be very new to you. And the person that you're interacting with, whether it's HR that's in the ops post here, whether it's HR that's presenting the offer, that's doing negotiating on behalf of the company, or if it's a recruiter. Sometimes what the companies do is they hire a recruiter. Either they hire a recruiting agency, or they have somebody on staff that this is their job. So what you have to recognize is the person that you're negotiating with, they are doing this all the time. So there's an element of the emotion is removed on their end. The adrenaline is removed on their end, but not on your end. So this is why the first thing I came to realize anytime I negotiated and worked through a new offering, I realized there's a difference here. And so I need to acknowledge that. And once I realize that and acknowledge that, then I can do something about it. Now, for the record, I interviewed once with a company when I first graduated college. I then interviewed with another company when I left to join the spring team in 2010. And then I interviewed to join Cockroach Labs. Now, I happen to be wearing my Cockroach Labs polo shirt, but today's episode is not about Cockroach DB. So I've done this 3 times. Now, some other people, I could maybe somebody you've talked to has been through 20 interviews in their career. I don't know. The other thing is what I'm trying to share with you is the fact that I've been involved in a lot of interviews. I've been on the other side of the table. And what I want to share with you is what is happening on the other side, both in the interview and before and after the interview, so you can have some information to act upon. And so the first thing that I came to realize is that the person I'm talking to is used to doing this, and I am not. And it's very easy for me to open my mouth and say dumb stuff, or I can make mistakes if I try to shoot from the hip or fly by the seat of my pants, to borrow a couple popular metaphors. So something I could tell myself. Now there's one more interview that I did. I didn't mention this, but when I was actually still at the university, they had a program where for people that were going to be graduating that year that you could go into. You could go to the registrar and they let you do a practice interview where you could sit down. They would have a video camera pointed at you, and they would run the video camera and they would ask you some sample questions. And the thing is it would be like, what's your favorite food? Or, it wasn't really, they weren't asking you tech questions because this was the registrar's office, but the idea is to get you used to talking to somebody. And then the thing is they would record it and then play it back for you. And I watched that video and I was just mortified and shocked because the whole time I was fiddling with my class ring, and I was propping up my legs, and I was moving a whole bunch of nervous energy. And I realized that does not look good. And I immediately, with the feedback in hand, thought, what am I going to do at my next real interview? I know I'm going to take my hands and I'm going to put them on my knees, and I'm going to hold on to my knees, and I will not pull my hands off. This stops me from doing any fiddling with fingers or my face or glasses. And it also stops me from crossing and uncrossing and crossing and recrossing and uncrossing and recrossing a dozen times my legs. So I did that going into my first interview. I was able to do that, and I felt control tamp down the nervous energy. Well, I guess it worked because they made me an offer. And also, I came to find out that was a company that tended to prefer hiring new grads. So I think they had some amount of grace for new grad candidates. They were used to doing that kind of thing. So I did that. And then what happened was is because I had gone to grad school at the time, they were short staffed. And so I actually got hired with an instant promotion. I was hired in as a level 2 software engineer for that shop. And then within 5 years, I got promoted to level 3, which is the fastest you could get promoted at that company by their own promotion standards. And then I was told very soon after I got to level 3 that said, your annual performance is partially tied to how much you contribute to the interviewing process. So there I learned a new thing, that not only was I supposed to write code, test it, deliver it, and produce it per requirements for my manager, but I was also expected to help curate new candidates coming into the company. And so I took that as, well, if you say I got to do it, I'm doing it. And I jumped in and participated in probably a couple dozen interviews over the next 13 years or so. And so I learned a bit, and I want to be able to share some of what I've learned in this context. Now, one of the things that happens in the interview process is they're trying to find somebody that they can hire to come in and solve problems. This is first and foremost what is happening. Um, Later on, I would actually became a tech lead and a group leader, and so I not only was I helping to interview people, but I was hiring people to work for me. Okay, people that were going to be on my team, who I was going to be dispensing stuff to, and then who I would be doing their annual review for. And I would talk to people that had polished up their resume. They would put things on there about what kind of extracurricular activities they did, what groups they were involved in, and something I had to share with them. One particular person who was working for me, who kept he invested a little bit too much time in the in buffing up the extracurricular sections, and I told him point blank, well, that's nice, but that's not why you're here. You're here to write code. The thing you want to be capturing is, what did you do code wise? What did you build that the team can use to move the business forward? The only extracurricular stuff I could think of at the time that is really a huge net benefit, other than, I don't know, showing me how good a person you are, is, did you participate in something like Toastmasters? Toastmasters is a group that helps with public speaking. I never attended a meeting, but I had several colleagues who did. And you would come to a meeting and they would have some kind of topic, and essentially you had to get up in front of everybody and start talking. I didn't do Toastmasters, but I had my own equivalent of having to get up and talk to customers and learn how to get up and speak to people. This further got compounded when I got on the spring team, and the spring team um, would host the spring conference, which is mostly the sessions are presented by the spring team. So there was multiple conferences, spring conferences I went to, where I was presenting one, two, maybe three presentations. And to top it all off, the spring team was notorious for we would have live coding in session. So it's not always just flipping slides. Instead, we would write code live in the presentation to demonstrate technology, to the point that we even had keynote material. When we created start.spring.io, we really thought long and hard about what was the keynote going to be like for that year. And the proposal was, let's walk onto stage, let's go to the lectern where computer is, and we're going to start with nothing, and we're going to build a sample web app from scratch in a keynote. Now, if you've gone to other conferences and attended keynotes, there's a bit of a philosophical discussion about what is keynote material. And let me tell you, that idea of live coding in a keynote is incredibly radical. Okay. It is crazy. And you know what? It went very well. It was received very well, because that was the caliber of the spring team. Was a team of people that knew the technology deep enough, well enough, and coded well enough that they could do that. And I kind of enjoyed that. I would build a REST API from scratch in my sessions to demonstrate stuff. So all this to say, there's different levels of interacting and presenting to people and demonstrating your knowledge set to people. And when you go into an interview process, you need to recognize what you can and can't do. And that's why it's okay to go into a Zoom chat, to have an interview with somebody. And then when they ask you a question, you can either give them an answer right there, or you can say, can I send you an email later today after the phone call or after this Zoom session is over? In this day and age, it is just fine to do that. Now, in the olden days, decades ago, when it used to be they may fly you into town, that was not an uncommon thing back then. I one time got flown out to I think Houston, Texas, and I was interviewed by ExxonMobil at the time. And we got a tour of the facility. I was there with about 5 other people. We got a tour of the facility, and there was interviewing going on. And that was a bit of a rush. You're thrown into an alien environment. They're interviewing. And the whole thing is whether you got a job there may happen then and there. And there may be no, let me get back to you tomorrow. It's kind of like they can throw stuff at you like that. It's not like that today. Okay. Which, by the way, I did not get an offer from ExxonMobil. One of the things I figured out was I was actually not interested in working with them for multiple reasons. It's not political or economic, just something about it didn't taste right to me. And so I told the recruiter early on that I was not interested. To me, it was more honorable to not force them through the entire process and then turn them down if I already knew that I really wasn't cool with that one. So we never got to money. So it was had that interview process had nothing to do with money. I signaled the recruiter I really wasn't interested, and they said, well, they appreciated that because it was one person less that they had to contend with, so they could focus on the other candidates. So whoever got it, I don't know if anybody in the other group got a connection. None of those people I knew. I didn't know the other people directly, so I don't know. So when you have this interview process, the what they're doing is they're trying to figure out, can you do what they need you to do? Can you write code? Can you test it? Can you deliver it? Do you have the capability? So that's what they're looking for first. And actually, the company that I did end up joining after college, they had adopted a process of doing a phone interview. They called it a phone screening interview. And the first thing on the phone was to figure out and filter out whether or not you even had enough technical competency to do it. And if you did demonstrate that, then they would fly you in and then have you more closely interviewed. And so I went through all that. I passed this phone screen interview and then I got on site. So today they may not fly you on site anymore, but it's not uncommon that one person is going to do a preliminary round of interviewing. And it can be HR or it could be a recruiter. And this is the part where they want to try to figure out, do you even meet their minimums? Now, I had when I wanted to depart from my previous company because I got married and we had my first child, we wanted to relocate. And so I was interviewing with one outfit that was kind of close to where we wanted to be, where we were planning to move to. And in that interview process, part of the competency was is they started asking me questions like, what does XML stand for? What does HTML stand for? What does all these, they started listing acronyms and they asked me, what is the definition of these acronyms? And I immediately thought, well, first of all, I answered them all correctly. So, so first of all, whenever you're in an interview process, my suggestion is don't ever get huffy. Instead, say, is there some reason to not be polite? I mean, to me, of course, there's always reason to be polite. Um, there's this movie that was based on a play called 12 Angry Men, and it's these jurors. I think it was a Henry Fonda movie, whatever. And um, they're all sitting in a room and they're trying to figure out whether this particular murder case that they listened to is true or not. And they get into some heated arguments. And this one person keeps saying, pardon me, or excuse me, or yes, sir, or no, sir. And this other person gets irritated and says, why do you keep talking like that? As if you're really mad at this person. Why do you keep using polite language? And he said, it was the way I was brought up. So if you were brought up to be polite to other people in an interview process, go ahead and use that kind of communication style. Now, if that's not your nature, if you're a bit more cut to the chase on this stuff, that's okay, but there's no reason to ever be rude in an interview. Just talk, be polite, nod along. If they ask questions, try to answer them. And if you don't have the answer, say, I don't know, but I can go look that up for you. So don't make up stuff. Now you can also say, well, I haven't had time to think this over and I may just be spitballing here. So it's okay to signal, well, this is part of what to signal to what degree you're guessing on something. Or you can just say, I sometimes there's an opportunity to go research something. Other times you have to make the best of the situation. Sometimes they ask you come up with what would be your proposed solution, and you can sit there and say, well, if I assume this and this, or if I assume we're running on a standard Google Cloud setup, and I could get all the machines I want, I would spin up 10 of these instances and I'll have them running such and such and spread them across. You can put out your assumptions and then what you would do on top of that. Demonstrate your analysis as if instead of you interviewing, you're actually sitting or talking to a customer who's levying requirements on you, and take that as input to go build what you're going to do. Um, the other thing to remember is anytime you're in a part of an interview, whether it's the first interview, whether you're talking to a recruiter, an HR, you're talking to maybe who's going to be your tentative manager, in any situation, you're on a Zoom call. Even if they have not said that this is an interview, act like it is. The first time I talked to the person who would become my manager at Cockroach Labs was actually just a few weeks after I was let go by VMware. Well, let go by Broadcom. It was just a few weeks later. This was a get to know you, meet you, introductory conversation. This was not at all part of their interview. But you know what? I treated it like an interview. As we spoke, I tried to, let's be polite, let me communicate. This is my chance to, by the way, subtly mention stuff I've worked on. It's not bragging if it's true, okay? And in a situation like this, they want to get to know you. They want to know, what have you done? What are you capable of doing? So I used the opportunity to talk about past projects. I used the opportunity to mention that I'd managed people. I used it as opportunity to mention I'd made YouTube content like this live stream that you're watching, which, by the way, if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell. If you're tuning in, you can also catch it at podcast.procoder.io and listen to it in audio version. Or if you use Spotify, the video version is there as well. But continuing on, I treated it as an opportunity to say, let me start listing one after another reasons why maybe they should launch an interview, why they should consider me a candidate. Let me establish my value to them. And every time you're in a Zoom call, whatever the environment is on site, if they're doing that for you, think about, how can I demonstrate that I'm bringing value to them? It's not that they owe me money, it's I can give them value. Because if you provide somebody value, the money will follow. The compensation package will follow if you demonstrate value. Now, one of the things that I did was, I was sure about was, I had also done a little bit of homework. So I had done a little bit of homework before the meeting. I had actually looked at Cockroach DB's YouTube channel in advance. And this is something probably most people aren't doing, at least what in the interview process, whatever company you're hiring for. Now I'm talking to you about tech stuff. Whoever the op that wrote this article, I have no idea what field this was involved in. It could be a tech worker, it could be anything. So they're not necessarily doing tech work, but for us, we can focus this down onto the tech world. And most people I knew, developers, don't do YouTube, don't have YouTube channels, so they would never look there in advance. But I did. I surveyed the content, and part of the discussion process, as I mentioned, not only can I write software, not only can you go find my efforts actually published from the Spring team, but I could point to my YouTube channel that I produce content, and I didn't say, look at my YouTube channel and pay me because I did that. Instead, frame it as, what's the value to them, and say, something else I can help with is, I can make videos for Cockroach DB. I could maybe launch a live stream about Cockroach DB and aim it at developers. So again, I can demonstrate that not only can I write the code, I can demonstrate it to other developers. I can help other people learn it. And there's, again, make the value. What value do you have? And maybe you've never even thought about that. Maybe that hasn't crossed your mind. What value do you offer somebody else? And this is why, when you're done listening to this episode of the Pro Coder Show, what you should consider doing is sitting down and opening up a brand new Google Doc and start writing down what your skills are. What is it that you can do? Are you a master Spring developer? Are you a JavaScript junkie? Do you know lots of Node.js toolkits? Start writing down everything that comes to mind, and you can work on curating that later on. But first, get it down, because I guarantee you, if you put this much thought in advance before your first call with anybody at this company, it's going to help form your thoughts better to be prepared for the interview. Because what happens is the people that are interviewing you are looking for things. First of all, they're looking at, does this person solve problems? It's not necessarily, does this person know how to use React JS 17.2? They're not doing that. Now, first of all, I threw out, what the point of that comment was, I threw out a specific tech stack and a specific version. Version numbers change, version numbers update. So just because you're a master of, say, React 17.2, does that mean you're a master of React 18.0? Maybe, maybe not. But they know anybody can go read the notes and catch up. That's not a hard thing. They may not be using React. So is it like, well, if I use React and they don't, does that mean I'm not a good candidate? Not at all. If you use a certain stack, it means you could learn the concepts underneath the stack. If you've mastered any tech stack, you can probably take the skills and use it to master another stack without starting from scratch. Somebody who's done no web technology has a bigger learning curve than somebody who's learned several different variants of web technology that just doesn't happen to be what this shop is using. And I've talked about that before on my channel. So the point is to try to use what you know to be leveraging new skills. But the point is you may have to learn the new skills when you get there. But it's okay to talk about, this is what I got. This is what I can do. So in this case, like I said, this is not showing off. This is sharing the value that you present. Now, again, to get to the ops question, finally get to the part, you've gone through several interviews. So they want to know, are you technically proficient? Can you provide value? You've probably had to, if you've gotten through several interviews, it probably involved either the recruiters or HR, and it probably includes some of the people you would tentatively be working with, or at least people in the department that you would be working with, even if the people interviewing you won't directly be directly working with. And so the thing is, they're looking for somebody that can solve problems, but they're looking for a couple other things. They probably want to look to see, are you a team player? Are you going to be able to work with this team? Or are you combative? Or are you full of attitude? And this is where being able to be, this is what's ironic. If you can demonstrate a little bit of humility while also demonstrating value, this works. So this is why I say it's not bragging or arrogant to share your skill set. Okay. It sounds ironic to say, how can I be both humble and demonstrating value? It sounds like I'm bragging and being humble, which sounds oxymoronic. Well, that's because this isn't like I'm trying to sell you on something I can't do. I'm not making up stuff just to try to get this job, because that would be dishonest. Okay. That is, I'm sharing the value I can provide. I'm sharing my knowledge, my skill set, and what experience I have so far. And even if this is your first interview, the experience you have so far can be the boot camp program you went through or the university classes you did. The university I went to, we had to do something called a senior design project. So we actually had to build a small system at one point and work with others. So right there, you're already gaining experience. And if you're a new grad, they understand that. They can put it through that lens. So none of this is bragging. We're just sharing honest value. But if you're demonstrating an attitude and a sense of entitlement, saying you people owe me money, well, they may think, I don't know if this is the best person as a fit for our team. So this is the other thing they're looking for. Now, something else that I noticed cropping up here in a lot of places. So zoom in here. So somebody here right at the top said this, what do I do? So they offered me 60 and I gave them a range of 65 to 70. What do I do? And somebody said, this is where you negotiate. And this is the question all of us are asking. How do I negotiate? Somebody else said to do it in writing. So I guess through email instead of a phone call. And I can hear the timidity in this ops voice. Or should I write it in email? And here they have some good points. I would be a bit more direct with the wording. So the op wrote this. Let me zoom out just a little bit. And I'll read it for those of you who are listening to the audio. Quote, I did want to mention that during my first interview, I had mentioned that my salary expectations are in the $65,000 to $70,000 range. I see that the offer letter has 60,000. Would it be possible to adjust the offer to align with the 65 to 70,000 range? Thanks. And I agree with this person uh, responding to the op who's more or less saying the way you wrote that is wishy-washy. This and here, this is the first reason why I say you don't need to call them back. It's okay in this day and age to do most of your negotiation through email. It's okay to finish the Zoom call. Maybe you did 3 or 4 interviews through Zoom calls. You finished the interviews, go take a breath, go downstairs, go get a glass of water, sit down and watch a TV show for an hour, something to let the moment pass. You don't have to answer 5 minutes after the Zoom call. You're going to be full of adrenaline, and it's okay to just wait. Okay. Let me repeat that for those in the back that didn't catch it. After any Zoom chat that you've had in the interview process, or any Zoom chat you had that even if they didn't say it's the interview process, treat it like the interview process. It's okay to hang up, go downstairs, and do something else. You don't have to answer. In fact, let me throw something at you may not have realized. It's okay to wait till the next morning to do the answer. Now you can start drafting it, like go use a Google Doc. Go use that Google Doc we talked about earlier and start formulating a response, but you don't have to send it till the next morning, first thing the next morning. I wouldn't drag it out past that, but it's okay to save it for the next morning. Okay. They're not going to rescind an offer, take away some kind of offer just because you didn't answer 5 minutes later. Okay. So the person responding said, I would be a bit more direct, something like this quote, thank you so much for sending this over. I really enjoyed meeting the team during the interview process, and I'm very interested in this opportunity. When I spoke with insert first HR lady here, I mentioned that my salary expectations were 65 to 70K. The response says, I would choose a number here instead of a range. I hope that we can bridge this small gap as I would love the opportunity to be a part of this team. And that's the response that this person is giving as a suggested rewrite. And they go on to say, feel free to adjust it a bit more personal to be a bit more personal or relevant to the position you interviewed for, but I would just try to be a bit more direct while also conveying continued interest in accepting the position. And I agree. There's several points in here that I don't want you to overlook. Thank you. Okay, let's look. First sentence. Thank you so much for sending this over. Remember that? Let's continue to be polite. Let's be polite and not combative, okay? Mm. So first thing is, thank you for sending this over. That's opening. You can call it fluff. Call it what you want. Say that that's fluff, but that's also perhaps greasing the skids. I really enjoyed meeting the team. So that's a first signal. Hey, that's a signal that I like the team. You don't want to say it. I enjoyed meeting the team. Hopefully they enjoyed meeting you. I don't know. They don't have that here. And then here's another ingredient that I really recommend. I am very interested in this opportunity. Remember I talked about the interview process I had with ExxonMobil? That was way back in like 96. I was not interested in that opportunity. So I withdrew. I took my name out of the hat. If you off the cuff are thinking, I think I would like this. Now, your reasons are your reasons, whether it's because you're desperate for money, you're desperate for a paycheck, maybe you got fired or let go in a round of layoffs, whatever the case is, you're desperate for money. Don't put that in there and say, you know, uh, I enjoyed meeting the team and I'm desperate for this role. No, I'm very interested in this opportunity. It can also be that if you're very excited about the technology. You can put that kind of comment in there. Why are you excited? It's okay to be direct and specific. I'm very interested in the chance of offering training over Cockroach TB. And in all sincerity, I was. I learned about the technology of Cockroach TB and I was super stoked about it. And I communicated that in my negotiation. When I spoke with Jim Bob Joe, whatever, I mentioned that my salary expectations were You can say at least $65,000. The point of you can use ranges, and ranges are used by companies to signal this is what we're looking for. It's an opening volley that signals this is how much budget we have. So if you're looking for 100,000 and their range is 60 to 70,000, you probably don't need to waste your time there. I'm sure they cannot go to 100,000 in that context. So the ranges is something that the hiring people, the company can give to give you a sanity range. You don't need to keep doing ranges because essentially at that point, if you give a range, their default is to go to the lowest end of your range. So just pick a number. And think of this. What is a number in my mind that's in their range that if I got that, I'd be happy? Remind yourself, if I got for this op, I'm just going to pretend to be the op and say, if they offered me 65,000, I would be happy. I would tell all my friends, my family, whatever, hey, I got this new job. It's a great job, and they gave me a great offer. If you got 65 and you were happy with that, then put that in your mind as this would be great. This would be great. You know, maybe if I asked for 65 and they give me they move up to 63. Well, it's not quite what I wanted, but it's close enough that I'm very well satisfied. Think about that. If you're asking for 65 and they're offering 45, you're probably not happy with that. That's lowballing stuff, and lowballing is a very negative thing. So they're saying at this point, there's also a philosophy here of wait a minute, hit the okay. There's also, oh, is it not jumping? Yeah, I need to be on this tab. Okay. There's also this philosophy out there that says whoever puts out the first number loses. That's kind of an aggressive 1950s sales thing, but there's an element of truth to that. Okay. Because, and I'll share with you some of the mechanics and then you can tell me if it adds up or not. So they've posted their range is 60 to 70,000. And well, let's imagine they didn't post a range at all. Oh, okay. No, let me go on. They posted a range. That's realistic. They posted a range. They're looking for something. They're going to pay 60 to 70. Okay. Behind the scenes, they're flailing. They need somebody fast. They figure this is the range they can do. They've got enough budget to go up to 75. You come in and you say 60 to 70. I can do the 60. I'll take the 60. And they say, oh, good, we're ready to go to 75, but they said 60. Okay, we accept your offer. Sometimes you can get this. We accept your offer 5 minutes after you post it. Sometimes that can be a hint that you asked too low, that they had a more headroom of another 15K in salary. And don't forget, this is the amount each and every year that you're going to get. So that's 15K each and every year you could have lost out. Now, maybe the 75 was if we can get a superstar, somebody who checks all the boxes, who can bring in a new business and who can really knock it out of the park, the upper limit of our expenses can sustain somebody at 75. Maybe you have 3 out of the 4 box. Maybe you have 50% or 75% of what they need. So they're not going to make you 75, but maybe that would be somebody they'd be willing to offer 70. Maybe if you've got 2 out of 4 of their major points, they'd be happy with 65. But you say 60, they've accepted that. So you just shot yourself in the foot. Now, what if their range is they post a range of 60 to 70, and then they're not dying, if you will. That's the thing. This is what you cannot see. Sometimes they're desperate, they're shorthanded. Somebody just left the team 3 months ago, and their throughput dropped by 33%. So they need somebody to get in there and start chewing through stuff. It can be the situation that they had noticed that somebody was going to leave, so they're not buried, but they know that they're about to be buried because the person's leaving in 2 weeks. And so there's 2 weeks left. And so they know that they're about to go to, so they're not as desperate as the first scenario. So in this scenario, they say 60 to 70, and 70 is their absolute upper limit of what they can afford. They can, the rest of the staff can cover stuff for a while, so they're not desperate yet. So their upper limit's 70, and then you say 60, they can accept that right away. They're gonna if you just throw out the 60, then they'll take it. Part of the thing is what their opening actual offer is can be a signal of where they are, because they could say our range is 60 to 70. During the interview process, they're going to assess your technical competency, how good of a team player you appear to be. Are you bringing extra value? And they're going to pick I theoretically, somewhere in that range, they're going to pick out an initial offer. So the part of it is wait for them to make that initial offer. And some shops will do the thing that the minimum that we're going to pay is what we're going to put in the range. So maybe if they put 60 to 70, they always start at 60. Some shops may adjust a little based on your interview process and say, we'll offer this person 63 or we'll offer 65. And if you had said there, that could be their initial offer. But if you say first, I'll take 60, they will accept it, even though they would have gone to 65. So this is where you don't need to be a jerk like in some of these 1950, is it Mad Men, that TV show that kind of is built up around that sort of 1950s sales buffoonery. You don't need to be a jerk about it. Remember, let's be polite. Let's try to be honorable. Let's try to bring honor to the name of being a pro coder. Um, which, by the way, if you go to member.procoder.io, you can actually join and catch on. We have some members only videos and live streams from time to time. But another thing is that, again, if you speak first, you could be shooting yourself in the foot. So if you can wait until they make an offer, it gives you better feel for where you can navigate. So if the range is 60 to 70 and they offer you 63, it may not be outrageous to say, well, if you make it 66, I'm very like what the op put here. Let's put the thing back up here. If you when I spoke, I mentioned that my salary expectations were, and this is again where the op already gave their range, and so I hold off on doing the range thing. But if you did that, that's fine. And say, if they had offered 63, I mentioned my salary expectations were at least 65, and this is where I've done this before. I say, if you can make it 65, you've got a deal. I'm offering them. This is like the equivalent of an Amazon buy now button that says, hey, if you if you this is the amount for 65,000, you can have me now, and we'll be done with the process. We can wrap it, because everybody wants to wrap the process up. Now maybe you want to wrap it up more than they do. um, but anyway, and I hope we can. And then I love this closing sentence that the person put on Reddit. I hope that we can bridge this small gap, as I would love the opportunity to be a part of this team. So the opening is you're signaling you're excited about the team, you like the people, you like the opportunity, and at the end you're signaling I love the opportunity to be a part of this team. You're signaling you're a game player. You're signaling you're excited to be there. You're not drudging in and dragging your feet because you're there for the money and nothing else. And then we saw this. This is something I saw that I did not expect to see. Um, Somebody else comments, who's a top 1% commenter? And I'm not asking anybody to go trash anybody on Reddit, but they say, just keep in mind, they may still rescind the offer. So if you're currently jobless or this 60K seems fairish to you when compared to the other job ads for similar role, then a phone call to the HR lady would be better just to test the waters. Email's way more formal and might be responded with a rescission. They're talking about they could rescind the offer. Now, several people started jumping onto this. They could rescind the offer. Like if you negotiate all, I think what this person is trying to communicate and say, if you're trying to nail down a small point in the process, a phone call is a little more, it's less formal and a little more personal and a little more perhaps emotional. Or you can say, well, I did mention this. Can we, what do you have to say to that? If you use the formal email channel, they may just rescind the offer. And that's true. In other words, nothing is settled until it's done. The offer is not solid until it's done. There's always risk, but I think some people are conflating how much the risk really is. For me, I would try to minimize the phone time because that's the time when if you're not trained in sales, it's very easy in the silence. The people who know how to do this process, who have done this all the time, the people that don't have the emotion, that don't have the adrenaline pouring into their system, i.e., salespeople you talk to, recruiters, and HR, they can say something and say, "Well, we offered 60,000," and then they know how to stop talking and wait for you to react. And sometimes those of us that don't do that every day, we can say, "Well, I would like 65." And instead of just sitting there and being silent and letting them digest it and letting them come up, you can sit there and talk yourself down and say, "Well, how about 62 or maybe 61?" And if they sit there and be quiet, it's almost a silent signal of we're not accepting that update. And you start to talk yourself down. And sometimes you need to shut up and let them respond. And that is very, very hard if you've never done that before. This is what I'm telling you. It's very hard to negotiate verbally like that on the phone. This is why my suggestion is to be able to sit down and write a neutral point is if you know you're going to have to call somebody, if you're going to have to make a phone call as part of the process to do some of it, it's good to sit down and work on notes, make notes in that Google document, what you want to say, rehearse it, practice it, and then make the phone call and say it. But I prefer using email as much as possible to do the negotiation. Somebody else commented, I second that. Phone call is much better way to negotiate. The vibe I get is this person is somebody who does sales, somebody who's involved in that, somebody does a lot, somebody who's front facing is on the phone all the time talking with customers or candidates or whatever. They've been able to work through. They've been able to. They've learned to overcome the butterflies. They've been through enough martial arts tournaments that it doesn't unsettle them to get on the phone and do this. And they know these kind of people tend to know when to stop talking and let the other side think about it. And again, this is the another person commenting, phone call is the way. This happened to me and I called the hiring. Now, here's a paragraph. I'm going to read it and tell you that there's a lot of information in here and what it means. Phone call is the way. This happened to me and I called the hiring manager, not the HR person, and said I got the offer, but I thought we discussed a salary of 65 to 70 and the offer was for 60. Then see what they say. For me, the manager said it should have been for 70K. So let me see what happened. Phone calls are much better than emails and letters in this situation, in my opinion. Good luck. Okay. Phone call is the way. If you know how to talk and negotiate and also when to be silent for extended periods of time on a phone call, then this absolutely can be a powerful tool for you. That's meeting their energy with the same energy. You see how I'm pausing here to let that sink in? It almost feels a little unsettling to the other side. If you can do that, then yes, this actually is superior. But if you're not used to it, it's a bit of a gamble. Now let's go look at what else they said because there's some other gold in here. This happened to me and I called the hiring manager, not the HR person. So here's something else that you may not realize in the interview process. Okay. The HR person or the recruiter, whoever's giving you the offer, whoever is communicating you the offer is not the person with authority. This is not the person. They've been given a range. Their task is to logistically coordinate interviews. Their task is to be the front person that primarily relays stuff to you. But anything you're sending to them, they're sending to the hiring manager, which potentially could be the boss you're working for, or it could be the boss you're going to work for, could be their boss, maybe involved, maybe the one managing it. The hiring manager is the person that gets to say yay or nay. And it's the person the recruiter and the HR person goes to for all approvals. And this is why in the interview process, the more you can build a relationship with the hiring manager, not the recruiter, but the hiring manager, the better chance you can negotiate a deal. The more you can present the value you have to offer to the hiring manager, the better the odds that the hiring manager can defend you to his manager or his or her manager. The better that person can defend you to get your actual just compensation package. And so this person is very correct in saying, well, I called the hiring manager, not the HR person. Why do hiring managers get HR, and why do hiring managers get recruiters to do this process for them anyway? It's because they're busy building the stuff. In this case, we're talking about software. They're busy managing their team. They're busy managing their team. They're busy writing code themselves if they have that in their capacity, and they're busy coordinating with customers. They don't have time to go sit down and plan a bunch of Zoom calls. They don't have time to put packets together, and they don't have time to do this a dozen times a year. That's a major drain on their time. Okay. And they're paid probably more than you will be. So if you take the amount of time it would take them to do the recruiting process, that's an expensive task to the company to pull that person away from their primary assignments. So they hire a recruiter to go do all the legwork. And when the recruiter has found the shiny rock, you and five other people, they're bringing them to the hiring manager. And the hiring manager is going to decide, well, let's look at these three, look the strongest, set up these interviews. They schedule the interviews. Um, the people on their staff, maybe people from other departments that the hiring manager works with a lot, is also part of the process. All these people get to meet you and the other five candidates, or the other three. Let's say they've narrowed it to three candidates. These people are going to do it, and they're going to come and bring their feedback. And probably somebody in there is going to be the person that they will now have spent several hours curating the information. And they're going to say, this person, it was stood out the best. They seem to show the most value. They seem to be best aligned with what we're doing. It sounds like they may fit our process very well based on what they've done. This is something you may not know. You may not know the characteristics you're showing that fit the team. These are the three people we checked out. We spent several hours in it. Mr. Hiring Manager or Mrs. Hiring Manager, we have these people. We think this person's the primary person. And then the hiring manager goes to HR or the recruiter and says, make that person an offer. And at this point, the hiring manager is thinking, I need to get that person on my team. Which is you. I need to get that person on the team. We found who we need. I just need them to wrap this up in whatever formalities the company does. The HR manager, the HR person, or the recruiter is trying to go follow a process that was given to them. Okay. The recruiter may have written parts of the process, may have coordinated. If this recruiter has worked in the industry as a recruiter for several years, they have processes to follow, but they don't have the money. The money is from the hiring manager. The hiring manager has the budget. The hiring manager is the person that's going to be leveraging your talents and paying for them, not the recruiter. As soon as you're hired, the recruiter's out of the picture, and you don't work with the recruiter ever again unless you become a hiring manager. So for them to have gone through 3 rounds of interviews for 3 different people, that's 9 interviews right there. Add up the time for that. That's 9 hours of effort. Throw in a few more hours to analyze, assess, sift through, decide what they're doing, and this is what they're going to do. So if they throw out the minimum, so the manager's like, we need to get this person hired. And the recruiter's recommendation is, well, this is the range we posted. Let's just start with the minimum. It's the simplest. There's no thinking or logic to it. Let's just throw out 60. And if they take it, we're good. If they take the minimum, the company will be profitable. Hold on. One of my kiddos here needs some access to video games while I'm doing this episode, while I'm recording this episode. Okay. So the hiring manager is the one with all the authority, the one with the budget, the one who can do this stuff. And so that's the person to connect with. So the recruiter's going to send out the minimum. And if the person accepts it, then they're done. And the hiring manager's thrilled. Okay, we've got somebody. They're going to start in 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, whatever the timetable is. For sometimes it's when the budget. Well, my budget opens up to hire this person starting on the first Monday in 2 months, that kind of thing. It's now scheduled thing. They've done all the work and they found who they want. Do you think so? I just mentioned three people through three interviews. Let's assume each interview is an hour long. That's 9 hours of effort. Let's add 4 more hours of curation, of sifting through, analyzing, meetings, deciding. Here's the thing: 4 hours of meetings, and let's assume this involves the hiring manager and two staffers. That's three people. Four times three, that's another 12 hours of effort that's not building systems, not writing software or whatever. There's 9 hours of interview time involved, and then another 12 hours of making the decision. So we're over 20 hours of effort here. That's a half a week of effort spent. And they send out an offer for $60,000. The person, okay, your range was 60 to 70. That would have fit in and not broken the company's budget for this year or the following years. Do you think that they're going to just say, well, you asked for six, the person volleyed back and said, well, if you make it 65, we can call it a deal. They didn't ask for 80, they didn't ask for 90, they didn't ask for 100. They asked for something that's square in the middle of the range that you offered. Do you think who's making a decision to say, well, that person's trying to rip us off? That person's trying to rip us off. We've got to hold it to the 60. The 70 was fluff. We can't go above 61. That is very unlikely. Now there could be shops that are like, we're going to interview 50 people and we're going to find somebody who's going to do the 60. We're looking for the bottom of the barrel. Wait a minute. They're looking for the bottom of the barrel. So if somebody tries to negotiate, they're going to throw it. So you're going to go and you're going to be interviewed. Maybe I'm going to interview three people at a time. Is this shop going to interview three people at a time and then they'll make offers to anybody? Are they're going to pick a top candidate? How much are they involved in the hiring manager in this process? Or is the recruiter doing it all? I haven't heard of this. They're going to go through three people. They're going to make three offers, and whoever accepts first gets the position, and the other two get their offer rescinded. First of all, it's possible for a shop to operate that way. And if they don't like any of these three people, they're going to just move on to the next three and the next three and the next three till they find somebody. Do they really do that? That kind of sounds far-fetched to me. Let's see. Let me look for. Now, here's somebody commented. I said the thing about do not negotiate. I put a comment in here, and you can go find this thread if you want to. But somebody commented when I said you can basically do the bulk of your negotiation through email in this day and age. People are used to that. There's nothing weird about it. Okay. And somebody commented, yeah, I was in commercial sales for most of my career, and it's very difficult for most people without training and practice. You hear that? Training and practice, to have the patience to remain silent after they've said what they had to say if the other party hesitates or does not respond immediately, to resist the urge to fill the silence with noise. They added a follow-on comment. In working with young reps as a sales manager, see, this person did sales. My rep and I were in front of a customer, and he had just asked the customer a very important question we had rehearsed in advance. You hear this? They've prepared for the meeting. They've analyzed it. They've even rehearsed it so it can look natural what they're doing. When the customer hesitated, clearly thinking it over, I sensed my rep was about to open his mouth again. I stabbed his left toe with the heel of my right pump. He shut his mouth. We got the deal. And some of the other comments, somebody's like, I have sales reps on my teams and it amazes me how they can't just shut up and let the sale happen. People that are doing sales struggle with this concept. Do you think you can do this? having had virtually no practice or training in this stuff? And my answer is probably not. I've been in this industry for 29 years and I would not trust myself to do this. I try to minimize it as much as possible. That's why I dread getting on the phone. The times when I did have to do it, the interview process, I made myself notes that I could read. This is why I like phone calls and not Zoom, not video calls, because it means I can look at my notes and not have to focus on looking at the camera. Okay. Now, somebody does have a comment. I had this happen once. I responded politely and professionally to their offer letter email to let them know that we had discussed a higher salary for me during the interview. And the only thing I got in response was an automated thing just fully rescinding the job offer. Huh. Well, I want to take this apart. First of all, it says I had this happen once. I don't know how many interviews this person has been through, but they're citing one instance. And we can sit there and say, well, is this anecdotal? Is this an anecdotal instance? I'm sharing anecdotes. I feel like I have a lot more data points than just one. They say I responded politely and professionally to their offer letter, and it said to let them know that we had discussed a higher salary for me. Okay, there's another aspect to this that I want to get across. Okay. Sometimes in the interview process, something is said or a question can be asked where they're looking for an answer, but there's a subtle nature where you don't have to answer the question that was asked. You can instead answer a different question. You can imagine a different question and you answer that. And it can sound like you're answering their first question, but you're not giving away the store. And this is what recruiters are good. Recruiters are on a timetable. They have a budget for how quickly to get this process done. And they want to button you up in an offer. They want to make an offer, they want you to accept their offer, and they want to wrap it up as fast as possible. And sometimes they're trying to push you to give the first number. There may have been a range in the posting on their website where they listed the offering, but the recruiter may never mention the range. Instead, they open with asking, what is your range? And you may or may not have looked at their range. What is your range? Well, for starters, maybe the range that they're offering does fit with what you were thinking of getting. And so, that's what this op did. But sometimes what you're looking for may be a little outside their range. Um, and so they're asking, what's your range? Because they want to figure out whether or not they need to end the call. They may do that early on because they want to figure out whether they need to cancel this batch of interviews or whether they need to proceed. They're trying to figure that out. Where does this person lie? And remember earlier, I talked about the idea is you want to present value. You want to demonstrate that you have value for this shop because maybe you're excited about what the offering is. I had talked to my future manager in that call I mentioned just a few weeks after I got let go. And in that one, he spent part of the time selling me on the technology and I was sold. I love cockroach DB technology and go get it. I was sold on the technology. The sound of it was fantastic, and I wanted to get this position. But I didn't. I went in with the position of, and so one of the early on they're asking me, "What's your range? What's your range? Let's talk about your range." And they're trying to get you to negotiate down to them, and they're trying to get you to talk. The other thing is that you be in a call. The recruiter doesn't have the emotion of that. They don't mind throwing out a range, and maybe you'll just mumble something, thinking you can bring it up later. Well, I don't know, 60 is okay, but maybe we can talk about a higher number later. You just said if you just said 60,000 is okay, why do you think you can push the number up? Maybe they're desperate and they were going to pay 75, even if that's not in the range that they posted. Maybe they'd take 75 if you have all the skill, all the value that they need plus more. But you just say, oh, okay, 60 is okay. So what do you do in that situation? When they're the only maybe there was a range listed on the site, but they don't talk about it. They're asking you first. What I would say is I borrowed some of those first comments that we read. Let's go back to them. Let me way up top here. So I use this as almost like a textbook here. Thank you so much for sending this over. Okay, they didn't send me an offer, but here's kind of the thing. Here's a sentence. It's almost like you need to practice this sentence and you need to use this sentence over and over. You need to be able to modify the language to make it different every time. I really enjoyed meeting the team during the interview process and I'm very interested in this opportunity. I said something very similar. I said, well, I'm very excited about this opportunity, but I'm still trying to figure out what my market value is. That's all I would say. I didn't try to defend myself. Okay. I didn't try to say because I didn't go to that argument. I just said, well, I'm very excited about this opportunity, but I'm still trying to learn. So I'm doing research. I'm trying to go and understand, and I'm looking at it's a hint that I am looking at in the market. It's polite. Well, thank you very much. If somebody asks you a question, there's this question that I hear that it's a little annoying, but I'm giving you permission to say it. When somebody asks you a question and you haven't formed your answer fully yet, or you're still noodling it in your head, you can say, thank you for that question. I hear that on podcasts. Somebody asks a guest a question. Well, thanks for that question. It's a reflex that you can say that's giving it's filling the silence that we all want to fill and giving you a chance to think your answer out. Well, thank you for the question. I'm very excited about this opportunity, but I'm still trying to learn what my market value is. And there's several things in there that if you hear it, you can realize it. You're signaling that it's not dreary. You've got some passion here, and the passion can be brought to their team. They can have access to your passion for you to contribute to the team. That's good. You're interested in the opportunity. Um, it also signals that you're doing research. You're trying to figure out what your actual compensation value is. I mean, I know I have, intrinsic value, but what is my market value? That's your salary amount or whatever all the benefits. I'm trying to figure that out. And it's also saying, I'm not about to give you a number right now. It's the most polite way to say, I'm not here. I'm not ready to give you a number right now. And if you're wanting to offer me a number, you need to go do the homework or you need to learn more about me. We need to talk more about value. And that's the thing where you can say, well, I'm very excited about this opportunity and I'm still trying to learn what my market value is. I can see many places where my skills can be contributed to this team. Where I've done training or I've done presentations at multiple conferences in front of hundreds of people, and I've also live streamed in front of thousands. Where you start, you're just keep sharing the value, keep sharing the value you bring. Just remember when value is brought, money follows. So if you keep showing the value, they're going to eventually have to bring you a monetary compensation for the value. And this is what we're all about. Pro coders, professional software developers. Uh, Again, they can now let's look at some of there were more comments down here a little further down. So, you know, I let them know we had discussed a higher salary during the interview. I don't know exactly what happened to this person's comment. Were they gruff in the way they said it? Did they say, you mentioned offering me this? Well, that may be enough of this person's not a team player. It could have been that. It could be this shop really was rough and tumble, and it's like the slightest deviation from their initial offer, they would say, forget about it. That's possible. I don't know if I want to work at an outfit that can't tweak a little bit. And several people commenting on it. Now they say you dodged a bullet. To me, that's a little dramatic. Okay, somebody responded to that and said you dodged a bullet. The person offering you the job has no idea how budgets, money, and employment work. That all may be actually true. The reason they did that, I don't know. Were they flush with candidates? But had they really gone through dozens of candidates? Had they spent the time to interview dozens of candidates, and you were that person was first, and they cut them off? I feel like there's more to it that we can't see. It also said it has the dialogue in here saying, um, Oh, what I'm realizing is I'm in my browser, I'm highlighting text, but the way StreamYard shares it, it can't see the highlights that I'm highlighting. Okay. That's okay. Uh, Trying to see, does the zooming? Yeah, the zooming works. Okay, so the zooming works if you're watching this in video. I let them know we had discussed a higher salary for me during the interview. That's a little fuzzy about. I haven't had that happen where I say, well, if you offer me this amount, you got a deal, and the next thing that comes to me is a job offer with a totally different amount. That is a case. The other person said I called the hiring manager. Well, I called or email. I would have messaged there. I would have messaged the hiring manager in like an email. I will first of all, I would have got off my laptop, gone and maybe eaten something like that. I wouldn't have instantly responded to the offer letter. I would have let my adrenaline subside. And that's something to do. It's okay to wait an hour, 4 hours. Sometimes you need to respond relatively quickly, but most of the time you don't. Um, One of the times when I responded the quickest was again, I was negotiating my current position and they had offered and they made a final they made what I call the final offer. I didn't we had done a couple rounds about things. Something else that's not talked here is I actually negotiated a signing bonus on top of the the salary, etc. Um, they also do stock options. Some outfits will throw stock options at you, and they'll raise stock options faster than salary. Okay, stock options have a finite lifespan. Typically, they're on a 4-year investment cycle. Now, other companies do other stuff, but the most common I've seen is there's some kind of 4-year cycle. The first 25% of the shares vest after year one, and subsequent shares can vest monthly or quarterly or annually. But basically, by the end of 4 years, all the shares they've offered you have vested and are accessible through whatever their package is. Now, if they have not IPO'd yet, then your shares may be illiquid. But some of the newer shops actually have mechanisms where you can actually exercise to buy the shares, even if you can't sell them yet because they're not IPO'd. But this is all additional compensation. And the point is there's companies that give stock options out, and the stock options they offer you is all you're going to ever get. Um, VMware would give me an initial package. This is back in 2000. They gave me an initial package, and it was several years later before I started getting additional options. It was certainly not something that happened annually. And again, options have vestment cycles. So it's very easy for them to throw that at it because it lets them dodge giving you base salary. Base salary contributes to their burn rate. So they the thing is it's the hardest hit against their budget, but it's the most substantive income coming to you. And I've even seen people get offers where they wanted this much, but the offer is actually below what they were getting beforehand, but they got a gigantic equity package, a bunch of options, and the options were going to totally vest in 2 years. And I could see what they were doing. They were essentially buying them out of their upper burn rate to get them into a lower burn rate with a bigger equity package. So it was like a one-time purchase to push down their burn rate. And so if that's a lot of mumbo jumbo, then we'll have to cover that in another episode of the Pro Coder Show. So let's go look at some more of this stuff. Okay. Let's see. What is somebody? Yeah, be very careful about them rescinding. I would start by saying I'm very excited to accept the role. I agree with that. I would like to discuss a few things first, whether call or email. Emphasize that you're excited and intend to accept. So this is good. They're talking. They're a little futsy about whether or not there's going to be rescinding. Somebody else they comment their variation is, I would say something like this quote, I'm so excited for this role. I can't wait to join the team. I believe for a reason that a salary of 70K is appropriate for what I have to offer. Do you think we could agree to that? That's a nicely worded statement to me. It's polite. It signals you're ready to join. You are there. You're not hardballing anything. You're not saying, well, give me the 80. You said 60 to 70. I want 80. You're not. Whether you're worth 80, you may be worth 80. We're not talking about that kind of a situation. Any comments? They could say no, but I don't think this is dismissive or too opportunistic. I personally use we phrases as much as possible, and that's a good one. The My publisher, Pack Publishing, they have a paradigm that you speak in a we tone of voice. So it's we is in the author and the reader are sort of together, working together on the same side of the screen. And you could say 70, I think a salary of 70K is appropriate. So you're not saying give me the money. You're saying, I think this is a reasonable offer. And they could come back and say, well, we're willing to offer you 65. And then they can, I like it. I like, if at all possible, for them to make a counter offer I'm happy with, and I like to accept their offer. I like to give an element of you win. You have counter offered I countered your offer, you countered my counter. I will accept that. The company is offering me 65 and I'll accept that. And so you guys win. It you don't say that. But it carries a flavor of that. Okay. And that puts you into your range. Now they go the added some more clarification. I'm currently making 47K, so I'm not willing to walk away from the 60K. I don't want to walk away, simply test the waters. In this case, how should I word it to HR in the call? So here's where the op starts putting out some what I call wishy-washy semantic. Well, I'm desperate for the 60K. I think they said that they got cut, so they don't have 47. I I'd like to at least get the 60K, but I want to test the waters. Okay, this is where some people rightly say there's risk here. Okay, if you're horribly desperate and you've got to get this, just take it, and you win in a sense. It's more than what you were making. There, you can't deny that. I don't want to walk away, simply test the water. So they want to do both. There is always risk. Yes, they could rescind the offer. What I'm telling you is it's not likely if your counter offer is within reason. If you said, maybe this op is I want the 60K. What if I asked for 64? I mean, my initial range was 65. You said the range, but if you say 64, you're kind of acquiescing to your own range, but 64 is more than 60. Now people will say, what's the difference? The difference is 4,000. That's not much. That's not. I think somebody tallied that the 4,000 is well, what's that? It's $166 every 2 weeks. So you're talking about 160 bucks, an extra $160. If they pay twice a month, it's an extra $160 a paycheck. Is that worth the risk? And I'm kind of like, you need to look at it from a bigger economic perspective. It's take the 4K and multiply it by every year of your career into the future. That's where you're baselining to, is that 4K is going to, unless you see a severe economic downturn and they actually reduce everybody's salary. I don't see that happen often. Most of the time, when they cut back, they just drop people, and the people that are still there get to retain on the same level or maybe get raises down the future. So whatever you lock in is going to be there for the most of your career. Now, maybe you get cut like I did in 2023 and you got to go somewhere else. But I actually went to another shop and secured a pay increase. Okay. But it's hard to negotiate to 70 when you're still at 60. It's hard to springboard to the 80 at the next shop if you're at 60. Maybe if you were able to negotiate up to 65, it becomes easier to go to 80 the next time you move on, whenever that is. So the op, hey, here's yeah. Oop, let me see if I can let's see if we can find it. A lot of people are repeating this, the language. I'm excited for this opportunity is a good one. They even say, if you were able to bring the salary up to 65 discussed in the initial interview, I'd be prepared to accept. That's almost I don't like that kind of tone because it says you said I already signaled this. I already signaled this. I'd leave that clause out. Just if you were able to bring the salary up to 65, you got a deal. I'd be prepared to accept that. You don't need to go point to the past. That's a little irritating to me. Uh, Now, here's a comment. This is a little more subtle here. This somebody says, if you're not willing to walk away from 60K, then accept the offer for 60K. You can't just say, yes, I'll take 60K, but I would appreciate if you offer more. They're absolutely right. You either accept it or you don't. You can't play both sides. It doesn't matter who said what to whom. You absolutely must be willing to turn down 60K to have any chance to get more than that. This is correct. This other one I don't like. It says, you can be very direct here. Is there room for negotiation? I don't like that phrasing. Somebody says, keep the fluff. Don't just ask for 70K. They clearly want you. So unless you're worried about losing the 60K offer, value yourself a little higher and expect a counter offer around 65. I think I mentioned that earlier. Um, yeah, don't say, would it be possible? Just that's kind of indirect. This is the one I wasn't a fan of. Negotiate if you're willing to lose the position, accept it if not. That's a little, there's not much subtlety in that. So the op is like, well, uh, I'm only making 47 now. I'm not willing to lose the position. Is there a way to test the waters for 65K without the danger of them rescinding the offer? You can't have it both ways. I think they're a little afraid. This op is a little desperate in what they've communicated, and I understand that. And they're saying you can't have a. Somebody says there's not a huge difference between 60 and 75. If you don't want to risk it, just take it. This says we're talking about $50 a week difference. Well, no, that's the difference of $5,000 is $100 a week, so it's not $50 a week. Now they say don't get greedy or overconfident because they've chosen you. Plus, remember the economy is going downhill. Getting a job offer of any kind right now is pretty awesome. Take your win, and once you get your foot in the door and prove you can do what you claim, then you'll have a bit more leverage in future negotiations. Plus, hopefully, a bit more rapport too. I don't know that I agree with this. I don't think the op is getting greedy by people suggesting negotiate, just push it up a little bit. I think greedy is trying to dive in and say, I want 80 in this range because I don't think they can go that high. So I think we've gone and looked at this. I think we've been able to talk about this. So there's a lot here. We've talked here for about 90 minutes, but there's a lot to this stuff. And the thing is, to be a pro coder, you can go to university, you can go to boot camp programs. You can go study lots of YouTube videos, read tutorials online, learn all kinds of tech stacks. But nobody talks about this. How do you negotiate? How do you go through the hiring process? And I like sharing with you what's the cost to the company every time they interview a candidate. If they're going to interview 3 candidates? I establish there's probably 20 hours of effort spread around the company doing this. Um, so the likelihood that they're going to rescind an offer if you do any amount of negotiation within the salary band range, I think is minimal. Now, I can't guarantee anything. Nothing is guaranteed in this world. Okay. Um, what is it? Except death and taxes. This is not a philosophical discussion. I think that's unlikely. Um, but this is your career. Act suitably. This is also a feeds into what's your nature. Maybe the first time you do it, you can kind of accept it, but after you get more seasoned in the industry, the more seasoned you are, the more experience you accrue, the more you're familiar with the process, the more you can wheel and deal. Okay. um, I had worked for 13 years at my first shop. I learned how to write code, work in the trenches. There were times I worked late hours. I felt like that was the time I really learned how to be a professional software developer instead of some kind of amateur hobbyist. The second 13 years, I worked on the Spring team. And in that sense, I learned how to build software for an international community, for literally millions of people. And I learned how to build it in the open in front of other people. I learned how to get on stage and present what we had done and to realize there's scenarios where somebody I'm talking to knows more than me, but there were many scenarios where the people coming to our conference were wanting to learn, and I was the expert in the particular technology we were studying. And so I learned how to be able to politely, calmly, humbly share what I knew, share my knowledge base. So by the time I got to where I am now, Cockroach Labs, I had a lot of experience and a lot of value to present. And so I shared that value and I negotiated what I felt was reasonable. And I also had learned the thing about communicate with the hiring manager. I had done that even before I got the interview established. And I finally did. I went through that, and later on, we had to. It was a year later. We had a chance to go present material to a customer. Let me get a drink here. We presented our content to a customer for a week long training session that went very well. It was a good presentation, and in the evening we had time for us to hang out, have meals together, and I got to chat with my manager sort of one on one in that situation. The other person who was with us had to bow out that evening, but I had a chance to sit there and chat with them one on one, and I talked about the hiring process to understand it, and he had looked at me and signaled that he was the one who had approved it. You know, it had come to him, and he had been able to communicate very straightforward with candor that um, he knew I had the value they needed for that team. And so he was able to go. It was not a challenge for him to go to his supervisor and get clearance for a signing bonus to have. A lot of shops have that. A lot of shops don't have that. Um, and so I was able to go do that kind of stuff. Not vast sums of money, but just what I feel was a reasonable valuation of my talent set. And I've tried every which way that I can to bring the value that I promised in the interview. I didn't want to promise fluffery because then I'd have to back up what I did. So instead, I try to bring the best of my ability to this outfit. And guess what? Next month will be my 2-year anniversary with this shop, and I'm still excited about the product. I just need to figure out time to go run more of the Select Star show. So thanks for tuning in for today's episode of the Pro Coder Show. I'm putting up some QR codes. You can go. Let me put the code up here, and I'll leave this up here. Go to you can tune in on podcast.procoder.io to listen to it in audio format. Not Audible. That's an audiobook platform in audio format. But if you go to YouTube, you can catch it all the shebang and see the comments that I did. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
This episode is over, but your code writing journey continues. Visit procoder.io to find links and resources to help you become a pro coder.